He had dreamed of owning that land long before it ever felt possible. It wasn't a sudden idea, nor a passing desire. It lived quietly inside him for years, growing slowly, shaped by moments of reflection and silence. While others dreamed of quick success or instant recognition, his dream was simple yet profound. A piece of land where he could build something that truly mattered. To most people it was just dirt. An empty space. An uncertain investment. A risk not worth taking. But to him it was possibility. From the outside his life looked ordinary. No privileges. No shortcuts. No guarantees. He carried responsibilities that left little room for mistakes, and his financial reality forced him to be careful with every decision. Still, the dream remained, persistent and patient, waiting for the right moment. When he first mentioned the idea to others, the reactions were predictable. Confused looks, polite smiles, subtle disbelief. Some told him it was unrealistic. Others said it wasn't the right time. Many insisted that people like him didn't take risks like that dreaming big without resources was dangerous. They weren't cruel. They were cautious. But caution can be loud when it's fueled by fear. The more he listened, the more doubt tried to settle in. There were moments when he almost agreed with them. Moments when he questioned whether wanting something so far beyond his current reality was irresponsible. And yet, every time he tried to let the dream go, it came back stronger. He began to study. Not just prices or paperwork, but patience. He learned how to plan, how to wait, how to prepare for opportunities long before they arrived. He observed how others failed not because they lacked intelligence but because they lacked endurance. Slowly his mindset changed. He stopped talking about the dream. Stopped explaining it. Stopped asking for validation. Some dreams don't need an audience, they need protection. While others spent money on temporary comfort, he saved. While others sought quick results, he embraced long-term thinking. It wasn't easy. There were sacrifices no one saw. Moments where enjoyment was postponed. Comfort exchanged for discipline. The land, meanwhile, remained there. Unchanged. Ignored. Undervalued. Every time he passed by it, something inside him tightened. Not out of anxiety but recognition. As if that place was quietly waiting for him, just as he had been waiting for it. Still, reality was unforgiving. Unexpected expenses appeared. Plans were delayed. Progress felt invisible. There were weeks when the dream felt distant, almost naive. Nights when exhaustion made the future seem too heavy to carry. But quitting never felt like relief. It felt like regret in advance. So he continued. One step at a time. One decision after another. Without applause. Without certainty. And then, slowly, the opportunity began to form. As time passed, the dream stopped feeling distant and started feeling demanding. It was no longer just an idea he carried quietly. It was a responsibility calling for action. The more he prepared, the clearer it became that wanting the land was not enough. He would have to change the way he lived, the way he thought, and the way he made decisions. He began to look at money differently. Every expense became a question. Every purchase, a choice between comfort now or stability later. Every opportunity, something to be evaluated instead of rushed into. There were moments when he felt behind. Watching others move forward in ways that looked easier, faster, more celebrated. People his age buying things, traveling, enjoying freedoms he had chosen to postpone. Sometimes that comparison hurt. Late at night, when the world slowed down, doubt became louder. He wondered if he was sacrificing too much for something uncertain. If life was passing by while he clung to a vision that might never materialize. But every time that thought appeared, another followed it closely. Giving up would hurt more. That realization became his anchor. When rumors surfaced that the land might finally be available, his heart reacted before his mind could catch up. The idea that someone else could take it, that years of preparation could disappear overnight, filled him with urgency. He knew he had to move. What followed was not romantic. It was paperwork. Phone calls. Appointments. Numbers that didn't always make sense. Each step forward revealed another obstacle. Fees he hadn't anticipated. Conditions that felt unfair. Processes that seemed designed to exhaust anyone without influence or excess resources. More than once, he felt the familiar sting of discouragement. There were days when he walked away from meetings feeling defeated before the outcome was even decided. Days when he questioned whether the system was simply not built for people like him. Still he returned. Again and again. Negotiations stretched longer than expected. Terms changed. Deadlines shifted. At any moment, the opportunity could collapse entirely. Every delay tested his patience. Every silence felt like rejection. Meanwhile, voices from the outside continued. Is that land really worth all this stress? You could do something safer. Why risk everything now? He listened politely. Then he did what he had learned to do best. He protected the dream. He stopped defending his choices. Stopped seeking understanding. He realized that not everyone needed to believe in the vision for it to be real. Some people only understand results. Then came the moment that changed everything. A proposal was placed in front of him. It wasn't ideal. It wasn't comfortable. But it was possible. Accepting it would require nearly everything he had saved. It would demand faith in a future that was still unwritten. There would be no safety net. No guarantee that things would go smoothly afterward. That night, sleep didn't come. He sat with numbers spread across the table, recalculating the same figures over and over, hoping they would somehow change. He imagined every scenario where things could go wrong, and every version of himself who would regret not trying. Fear stood on one side, purpose on the other. He realized something then: fear would always be there, waiting, ready to grow if he let it, but so would regret. And regret, he knew, was heavier. When the moment came to respond, his hands trembled slightly. Not because he didn't know what to do, but because he understood the weight of the decision. Saying yes meant commitment. Saying no meant closure. He said yes. The process intensified after that. What he thought was the hardest part turned out to be only the beginning. More documents. More conditions. More moments where everything felt fragile. At times, it seemed like the deal would fall apart at the last second. Each call made his heart race. Each email carried the possibility of failure. But something inside him had shifted. He no longer felt like someone chasing a dream blindly. He felt like someone defending a future he had already claimed in his mind. Weeks passed. Then one ordinary day, an unexpected call came. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, almost indifferent. Everything had been approved. For a moment he couldn't speak. Not because he was overwhelmed with excitement, but because his mind struggled to accept that the long wait, the tension, the uncertainty, had finally reached a turning point. He hung up the phone and stood still. No celebration. No announcement. Just silence. Because deep down he understood something profound. This was not just a transaction. It was proof. Proof that patience accumulates. That consistency compounds. That dreams backed by discipline eventually find their way into reality. But the journey wasn't over yet. Not even close. He went to the land alone. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't take pictures. There was no need to document it. That moment wasn't meant for proof. It was meant for understanding. When he arrived, nothing looked extraordinary. The ground was uneven. The space was quiet. The surroundings were unchanged. To anyone else it was still just land. But to him it felt different. Each step he took across that soil carried years of waiting. Years of doubt. Years of choosing discipline over comfort. He walked slowly, letting the silence speak. Letting the weight of the journey finally settle. This place had witnessed nothing. And yet, it represented everything. He stopped near the center of the land and looked around. The wind moved gently, brushing against his face as if acknowledging his presence. For the first time he allowed himself to feel it fully, not excitement, not pride, but something deeper. Recognition. He recognized the version of himself who once stood here imagining a future that felt impossible. The one who doubted quietly. The one who stayed patient when impatience would have been easier. He remembered the voices. The ones that laughed politely. The ones that warned him. The ones that told him to be realistic. They hadn't meant harm. Most of them were protecting themselves from disappointment. But their fear had tried to become his. And it almost worked. He sat down on the ground not because he was tired, but because the moment demanded stillness. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. This wasn't the end of a struggle, it was the confirmation that struggle had meaning. For the first time he allowed himself to imagine without guilt. Not unrealistic fantasies but grounded visions. A structure rising slowly. Mistakes being corrected. Time doing its work. Growth happening not overnight but gradually. He understood then that the land wasn't a reward. It was a responsibility. Owning it meant committing to everything that came next. The failures, the adjustments, the learning curve. There would be moments when progress felt slow again. When doubt returned. When results took longer than expected. But this time doubt wouldn't feel the same. Because now he had evidence. Evidence that he could persist without applause. Evidence that silent consistency had power. Evidence that he could hold faith even when outcomes were unclear. As weeks turned into months, his life shifted in subtle ways. He spoke less about plans and more through actions. He listened carefully. He planned deliberately. There was a calmness in his decisions that others began to notice. People started asking questions. Not skeptical ones, curious ones. How did you manage that? Did you really believe it would work? Weren't you afraid? He answered honestly. Yes, he was afraid. Yes, he doubted. Yes, there were moments he almost stopped. But fear was never a signal to quit. It was a signal that something meaningful was at stake. The land slowly began to change. Not dramatically. Not in ways that impressed strangers. But enough to reflect intention. Organization replaced randomness. Structure replaced uncertainty. What once seemed abandoned now felt purposeful. And with every small improvement, something inside him strengthened. He realized that success didn't arrive as a sudden transformation. It revealed itself quietly, through repeated choices made when no one was watching. The land became more than property. It became a reminder. A reminder that progress doesn't need approval. That dreams don't need permission. That believing in something before others do is not foolish, it's courageous. Standing there one evening watching the light fade across the horizon, he felt something settle within him. Not because everything was finished, but because he knew he had proven something important to himself. He was capable of staying. And that changed everything. As time went on, something unexpected happened. The same people who once questioned his choices began to look at him differently. Not because he spoke louder or proved anything intentionally, but because consistency has a way of revealing truth without explanation. They saw that he hadn't rushed. They saw that he hadn't quit. They saw that he hadn't been chasing appearances. What once seemed like stubbornness now looked like vision. The project continued to grow step by step. Slowly. Intentionally. There were still challenges. Moments of uncertainty, delays, decisions that carried weight. But none of them felt paralyzing anymore. He had learned something essential. Progress doesn't eliminate fear. It teaches you how to move with it. The land, once ignored and underestimated, now carried meaning. Not because of what stood on it, but because of what had been built through it. Discipline. Patience. Identity. It represented every moment he chose effort over ease. Every time he stayed when leaving would have been simpler. Every sacrifice made quietly without guarantees. Standing there one last time, watching the day fade into evening, he reflected on the journey. If he had waited for certainty, he would still be waiting. If he had waited for approval, he would never have started. If he had waited for the perfect moment, it would have passed. What carried him forward was not confidence. It was commitment. Commitment to a future he couldn't fully see. Commitment to a version of himself he hadn't yet become. Commitment to the belief that slow progress is still progress. He understood then that the true value of the land had never been measured in numbers. Its real worth was internal. It shaped him, strengthened him, proved something irreversible, that he could trust himself. The journey didn't make him extraordinary. It made him consistent. And that was enough. Because the most powerful stories are not about sudden success or dramatic victories. They are about quiet persistence. About choosing to continue when no one is watching. About believing in something long before it becomes visible. The land was no longer just a dream fulfilled. It was a reminder. A reminder that everything meaningful takes time. That patience builds foundations stronger than speed. That the future belongs to those willing to stay when results take longer to arrive. And as he walked away, he didn't feel like someone who had finally arrived. He felt like someone who had finally begun.